Now that the game is done, it's our time to check in.
Simons drives around Green. Portis trying to close the door. He lays it in with a foul. Oh, what a big-time bucket.
Bucks Talk starts now.
Lillard catches the ball, puts up a three. It's back iron strong, and the Blazers are going to come away with a win. The NBA Cup hangover continues to loom.
And now, live from Fiserv Forum, here's Justin Garcia and Brandon Sneide.
Well, a suboptimal game here tonight for the Bucks, who come up short against the Brooklyn Nets, the Portland Trail Blazers. So a stretch that we looked at on the schedule, and much like earlier this season when the Bucks were coming out of a 2-8 start, you said, look, here's your opportunity to really do something. They did. And a similar stretch of games here where we once again said, here is your opportunity to do something and to maybe start to emerge as a team that could challenge the Knicks or potentially the Celtics for a 3 seed. Instead, it's been struggles for the Bucks. And look, you did play a couple of these games or losses without both Giannis and Damian Lillard, and Doc Rivers pointed that out, but also was quick to say it's not just that. We've seen a lot of the same play consistently in the games even that we won without Giannis and Damian Lillard. And tonight's another one of those games that, this loss was, I wouldn't say entirely, because they were much better defensively, but as Doc also pointed out after the game, there were some things they did not do too well on the defensive end. But a majority of their struggles tonight were once again on the offensive end for a team that is built around Giannis and Damian Lillard. 855-616-1620 is that number to join us tonight. You were about to say what?
I would say, Justin, that going back as far as I can remember, outside of that 2-8 start, this is the worst loss of the season. This was absolutely pathetic. This was a pathetic showing from a team that Justin has tried and has accomplished a lot since that rough start. They dug themselves out of that hole. They found ways to win. They went to the NBA Cup. They won the championship there. They beat really good teams. Oklahoma City, I don't even know if they've lost since they lost to the Bucks in that NBA Cup final. And back-to-back home games were teams that you're clearly better than, number one. And number two, teams that are trying to lose, that aren't very good. And I'll give Portland. They're better.
The players are not trying to lose. That's
correct.
The ultimate caveat is, look, the front offices may have different plans, but the players on the floor are not trying to.
That's fine, but there's no reason for that showing that we saw tonight from this Bucks team to be on display. Not only on Thursday night, but now on Saturday night at home. Again, at home, you lost to Brooklyn, who was on the second leg of a back-to-back. You were down 24 points in that game. You had a miraculous 20-0 run to get back into the game. They were, the first half tonight, sloppy, lazy, no focus. Damian Lillard and Giannis, I don't think Dame knew how much time was on the clock at the beginning or the end of the first half.
I'm not going to put myself in their mind and go with unfocused, lazy, pathetic. It's all incredibly harsh, and I wouldn't reserve that for this game because it is very simply a make-or-miss league. And I'm not saying the Bucks played terrific offensively. They missed a lot of shots they normally make tonight, and the big piece there is they missed 9 shots at the rim. I think Giannis had 6 of those. Those are almost always 2 points. That I think the Bucks shot 55% on attempts at the rim tonight. They're traditionally around 70% or better. So that's a big piece of it. And outside of Terry Bird, they were 6 of 28 on threes. That this was rampant across the team. They missed shots. And I know it's not an answer that everybody wants to hear of, well, you're just making excuses. You hear the phrase, it's a make-or-miss league for a reason. The Bucks did not make shots tonight. But it's not all that. I mean, they did not put themselves in the greatest spot offensively for stretches of this game. But where I struggle to go quite as harshly as you did is because even when they did and set up those looks, they just didn't make them. And it's not just, well, they missed a ton of threes. They chucked threes and missed them. Giannis is missing shots at the rim. Like, I don't know off the top of my head what the most layups or dunks he's missed in a game are, but the 6 or 7 tonight, if it's not the most in a game, it has to be pushing that.
Yeah, it definitely does feel like the most he's had in the game for sure. I mean, you call it harsh. I don't know if I'm being harsh enough on about this team. This is an opportunity for this team, Justin, to kind of right their wrongs over the last week or so. He had 2 losses to Brooklyn, 2 of them coming within 8 days. You lost to the Chicago Bulls. I know you weren't fully healthy, but it's a team that, on most nights you're probably going to beat. Then you come back home, and then you throw that game up against Brooklyn. You almost come back there. And then tonight was just, I don't know. It's frustrating because this isn't the team that – and I think I've been optimistic about this team really over the course of the last month or so, maybe a little bit longer. But when you go up tonight against an inferior opponent, and we don't have an excuse anymore. Chris Middleton's back. You can make the argument if you want that if he should be in the starting lineup or he should not be in the starting lineup and coming off the bench. You have Giannis. Giannis has been back now for a few games. Damian Lillard's been back for a week plus. You have your group of guys without AJ Green tonight, Justin. Like, he's going to get the game ball. 21 points off the bench. They had 42 as a team off the bench. He had half of the bench scoring on 7 of 13 from 3. Without him tonight, this is a 20-point loss against a Blazer team that is 11 and 22 coming in and has lost their last 2 games. I don't know. If you can say it's harsh, that's fine. I don't think I'm being harsh enough on this team because this is pathetic. Back-to-back home games. You have the opportunity to get back, into the driver's seat, in the middle of that Eastern Conference. You had the NBA's easiest schedule, throughout the course of, the month of January, and you're 0 for 2 already. And thankfully they came back down 19 against Indiana, or else what kind of conversation would we be having? What would that be? 4 or 5 straight losses? Like, it's just, it's not good right now. And it's a long season. I mean, they're not saying they're done, that their season's over. But it's stuff like this that bothers me because it's an opportunity that they worked really hard to get out of the hole that they were in, and now they're digging themselves right back into that same hole.
855-616-1620, the number to join us tonight on Bucks Talk. And we have a few on hold, including Dick in Port Washington. We'll hear what you have to say after this on Bucks Talk.
Welcome back to Bucks Talk.
Bucks with the basketball. Here's a catch-and-shoot 3 from Green, and he rattles another one home. A.J. Automatic tonight. He has hit 4 of 5 3-point attempts in this opening 14 minutes of this game. I mean, he is absolutely incendiary to start this game.
Yeah, 4 of 5 at that point from A.J. Green. He finished 7 of 13. I think, look, you clearly missed A.J. Green quite a bit against the Brooklyn Nets on Thursday as well. But outside of A.J. Green, you didn't really have an efficient scorer tonight. Giannis did finish with 31 points, but he was really towing the line of that 50% shooting for the 3rd consecutive game, too. And as just noted, the Bucks just left a lot of points off the board tonight, not just with missed threes, but shots at the rim. And it wasn't, to me, just the shots that they missed at the rim. It was the fact that the Bucks generated 2 fouls on those field goal attempts. I mean, Giannis alone will get to the free throw line 10 times from attacking the basket in a game. And that 2 number just shows you what the Blazers are able to do. And before the game tonight, Chauncey Billups talked about how they were going to have to defend Giannis as well, and said he's a nightmare matchup in getting better and better. When you add in things like his mid-range shot, you just have to load up and make him work for it. You have to change your looks, change the players that are defending him, change the way that you're throwing defenses at him multiple times a game, because once he sees what you're doing and figures out how to attack, it's over. And that's what the Blazers did tonight. They put Denny Avdija on him for most of the game, but you saw DeAndre Ayton on him. You saw Donovan Clingan on him. Tumani Kamara and a few others were jumping out there as well. That he just never looked comfortable, and I think his shooting line speaks to that, but not just the misses. Where the misses came from, those dunks and layups, 7 of them I think he missed in this game. 855-616-1620, the number to join us tonight on Bucks Talk. Let's head to the phone lines and check in with Dick in Port Washington. Dick, what are your thoughts after this one?
Well, Justin, I've been calling you for several years, and I'm going to summarize where I'm going to go with this, and then I do have a positive at the end. You know, I saw Wicked over the holidays here, and I think what you're going to realize is that once you get to the Emerald City and you look behind the curtain and you don't find there's a wizard, you're going to find that it's the Bucks sitting there. We have lost at least 7 to 8 games that there's no way in heck we should have. We lost to the Nets 3 times, Chicago 2, the Hornets, the Blazers, and I'm probably missing some. The reason people talk about the Great Five, that we got 2 guys in the top 75, where were they tonight? You're going to cite Giannis's scoring. How many layups did he miss? You know, defense from those 3 guys, I didn't see much of it. We're throwing the phantom guys in the corner. I agree with your callers. This is beyond. The other night I called in and I said they're an average team. There's no way they're an average team. They're a below average team. But with that said, here's my ray of hope. I don't see a bulletproof team in the league. Look at the scores tonight. It's unbelievable. And most nights you see some scores like this. And I haven't done this, but I bet if you go and look at the scores of some of these supposed upsets tonight, the three-point shooting of the team that won was the reason they won. We're heading backwards, like your co-host said. We're this jinx from the tournament. Come on. We've got 3 all-stars, supposedly, 3 great players. One of those guys should have stepped up tonight, and none of them did. And I don't think if you look back at their 8 horrible losses, none of those guys stood up. And I think Giannis, the other day in his press conference, said, it's us. You know, you got to take responsibility. I don't know what's wrong with Dame. You look in his eyes, I don't see any fire. Chris, he disappears. And you can hear my frustration because I love the Bucks, I love the NBA. But I want you guys to respond to it.
The three-point shooting was a big difference in those games that we mentioned. The three-point shooting, not a huge difference in this one, but again, for everybody else, it was somewhat of a difference in this one tonight for the Bucks. Damian Lillard has really been struggling since coming out of the NBA Cup, and it's a number of things. It really started that game in Vegas against the Atlanta Hawks when he was up against a lot of very good perimeter defenders, most notably everybody on the perimeter, really, for the Hawks, but Dyson Daniels in what he was able to do. I think Dame was 3 of 16 in that game. In the games that he has played since the Cup, he has not been efficient. I don't know how much of that is tied into everything the Bucks poured into the Cup, how much of it with Giannis, too, who also has not really looked himself. He's had some good stretches, certainly against the Pacers in that comeback. But Giannis hasn't been the same level of efficiency since he's returned to the floor. And both of those guys were dealing with a respiratory illness that was going around the team. And a handful of us in the real world have dealt with as well. So I think it's a number of things there. But it's what stands out in games like tonight, that for all of those things that we talked about, Bucks not hitting shots. Giannis, it was more than I initially said, 9 layups or dunk attempts, 9 of them that Giannis missed in this game. A game where he missed 13 shots. 9 were shots he's traditionally making 80% of the time. But outside of Giannis still willing his way to 31 points and A.J. Green having that outburst, what you really missed tonight was, okay, who else is going to have some shots here? Because Ryan Rollins has given you some nice moments. Gary Trent Jr. has given you some nice moments lately. Bobby Portis, especially in home games, has been very, very consistent in giving you those offensive boosts. You got none of that. You got 47 points from Giannis and Damian Lillard, and the rest of the starters scored you 13 points. Brandon, you mentioned the 42 from the bench. Half of it came from A.J. Green. Take him out of the mix. Nobody else was efficient. Bobby Portis, 4 of 5. Taurean Prince, 2 of 5. Gary Trent Jr., 2 of 5. So nights like this, to make it as simple as it is, it's a make-or-miss league, but nights like this are where you need Damian Lillard to be Damian Lillard, and that's what the Bucks really missed.
Yeah, you mentioned 47 points. Giannis had 31 of those between the two of them. He had stretches, Justin, where I feel like he was starting to kind of feel like the old Damian Lillard, and I like that. You know, for him, me,
when three at the end of
it just kind of felt like, okay, maybe he's snapping out of it. And again, it's a soft tissue injury with that calf, so maybe that is something he's still fighting back. I don't know. But for me, I think the key for him, and I haven't watched Damian Lillard throughout his career. I'm not lying. Since he's come to Milwaukee, I've watched him, obviously. For him, it's getting off to good starts is when I feel like he's at his best. And not obviously just the beginning of the game, but throughout the course of the entirety of the game. And I would like to see him be a little bit more assertive. I mentioned it on Buck Shoot-Around tonight. I've talked about it a number of times, as well as on social media. I would love to see the offense run through Dame, especially early. Giannis is always going to get his. I mean, he was 14 to 27 tonight and finished with 31 points. He cleans up half of those misses, Justin, that you talked about. We're talking about a 40-point performance from Giannis and the Bucks probably winning this game. And, again, he talked about it. I played the clip on Buck Shoot-Around of Giannis. He's still trying to get his conditioning up to where it needs to be. He missed quite a bit of time with the back spasms and the respiratory illness that you mentioned. I'm not necessarily worried about Giannis, to be quite honest with you. I know tonight was an uncharacteristic performance from him, but I think you have to see better from Damian Lillard. And it's not just better, Justin, it's better efficiency. These numbers just kind of haven't been up to his standards and the standards that we put on him probably to be, where he wants to be and where we want him to be, 5 for 15 tonight. I feel like Damian Lillard would tell you if he was sitting right here between us that he needs to be better. Chris Middleton kind of looked out of sorts tonight. I don't know. Again, I'm not going to create any problems, but I don't know if, having him in the starting lineup is a good or bad decision yet. And I know the tail is still out there. They got to figure that out. But
so we talked Thursday night after the Nets game about the Andre Jackson Jr. play, and I had said, look, I think Doc's reaction to it kind of tells me he thought it was at least borderline a flagrant 2 and didn't have an issue with it. And before the game tonight, Doc basically confirmed that and doubled down on it and said, look, the official talked to me. He told me you had another play prior to this where you're getting into it. It's one of those things you have to learn to control yourself. Tonight after the game, he didn't necessarily say maybe we revisit the starting lineups, but what you just brought up, he didn't sidestep the question where he said, the large point was, look, we were rolling going into the Cup, and Doc has said this a couple of times already, right around that time of the year when we got to late November, December. I think we were playing the best basketball in the league. I think we could have beaten anybody, and I think we showed that when you look at playing the Magic's game and beating them in a slugfest, doing the same thing against the Rockets, but in that Cup run, doing it against the Magic, beating Atlanta on the road, demolishing the Oklahoma City Thunder the way that they did. And Doc said, look, we had a lot of things change. Like, we kind of found our rhythm. We were really rolling, and we've had to reintroduce Chris. And in those games when he first came back and we were really rolling, he was coming off the bench. And I forget how he phrased it exactly. I was trying to find my notes here, but we were bringing Chris off the bench when we were rolling. We got to look at all that stuff for sure. Which to me, it's not him saying, look, Chris is our starter and this is what we're doing. It's him leaving the door open to say, we found success. I'm not saying that Chris Middleton is not going to be the starter again, but maybe we need to shift back to it, because I was talking about it with somebody else tonight too. It's not just looking at Chris Middleton's numbers and saying maybe he's still reacclimating himself. It's looking at every single player around him, because of how much that changed what you asked of Taurean Prince, and I think we saw him have to adjust to it. It means guys like Ryan Rollins are out of the rotation. It means Gary Trent Jr. and A.J. Green are fighting over fewer minutes now. So it's really had a trickle-down effect, and to Doc Rivers' credit, he indicated everything is on the board, that I think we have to look at everything that's come out of these last 5 games.
Well, and I didn't hear Doc's comment, so that's that. I like the sound of that, because, and that's the kind of coach Doc is, and that's what I've said. I said it on Thursday, even despite the loss, and I've said it throughout the course of the year. I like that they have Doc Rivers in charge, because he's a guy that he's not afraid to own up to a mistake and make a change, and for the betterment of the team. And look, and you and I had this discussion a handful of weeks ago too, where do you start Chris? Do you sit Chris to start the games off? I think that they are able to stagger the minutes enough and play them together in good moments. And I just like Chris Middleton. Again, public opinion or personal opinion, I like Chris Middleton coming off the bench, because I feel like he's able to be not only a shot creator, which he can do. There's only one ball to start the game, and maybe it gets a little bit crowded to start those games, and Chris gets off to a cold start. I think he's a great playmaker too, Justin. And that's the other conversation. If he can be in that, coming off the bench with Bobby, being able to create shots for other guys and find the open guy. I just think he's a great playmaker. He's a great facilitator of the ball. And I don't know. It's obviously a conversation Doc's probably having. You and I are clearly having. It's a good problem, I guess, to have, because you can't really be wrong, I guess. I mean, you're talking about benching having one of the better guys on your team come off the bench or start him, so it's not a bad problem, and you have the depth on the team. You and I talked about that last week, about the deepest team that we can remember. So it's a good problem, I guess, to have something they can still figure out. And look, you're 17-16. The season's not over. I know I'm frustrated tonight. I just expected this team to kind of be refocused, Justin, after that Brooklyn game, and kind of wake them up a little bit and be like, all right, we have a handful of home games where we put ourselves in a little bit of a hole. We should probably be a handful more games up above 500, but so that's where my frustration lies tonight. By the time you and I are walking out of this arena, I'll be over this game. But right now I'm frustrated, because this team is better. The showing that they put on tonight, they're better than that. They'll tell you that. They know that. Doc Rivers knows that. Bucks fans leaving here were talking about it. They know that. That isn't the team that we've grown accustomed to over the last 45 or more days. And I expect them to rebound on Monday at Toronto, and then again another tough test on Wednesday when Victor Wembanyama comes to town. So it doesn't get easier, but these last few games should have been, in my opinion, the reverse results, and they just weren't.
855-616-1620, the number to join us tonight on Bucks Talk. A few more calls to get to, and the offense, kind of digging into where the issues have fallen there. We'll get into that coming up next.
The Roundball Repartee returns. This is Bucks Talk.
Lillard flicks the pass over to the left wing, catch and shoot 3. A.J. Green with his third long one of the night. Sticks it from the left wing, and A.J. is shooting with confidence here tonight.
21 points tonight from A.J. Green, 7 of 13 on three-point shooting, but he was the outlier on a night where the Bucks did shoot 32% from the outside, but their starters were 12%, and the entire team outside of A.J. Green was a combined 21% on three-pointers in this game. 855-616-1620 is the number to join us tonight on Bucks Talk. Let's head back to the phone lines and hear from Q in Milwaukee. You're up next.
Justin, I have been pretty optimistic about this team, and I'm not writing them off, but there have been two major issues that I've seen from this team post-Vegas. Number one is the norovirus. I'm pretty sure that's what they all had.
Yeah.
And number two is, you guys stole my thunder, Chris Middleton starting. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not necessarily him starting, but it's the impact that it's having on the rest of the role players on this team. And, like, Taurean Prince just looks better with the starters, and the second unit looks better with Chris playing with them. I don't know, like, outside of them all just having a Las Vegas hangover from the norovirus that they caught there, I don't know what else the issue is. Like, that's the thing that I can see with this team. My other complaint is I don't know why, but it just seems like Damian Lillard looks to defer to Bobby Portis when they're on the court together. They have had somewhat of a connection, but the second to last play where he is looking for Bobby, like I just don't understand it. It's like, dude, you're Damian Lillard. Like, we're paying you $50 million. Like, take that shot. Like, everyone in the arena wanted you to take that shot, and I don't know why he's looking for Bobby more than he's not in, like, pivotal moments. But still, like, this game, realistically, like, whether we're a 5 seed or a 3 seed or an 8 seed, like, we're not going to be thinking about this come spring. But it's just, this is the most, I have not been this frustrated with the Bucks team in a long, long time. I was there tonight, and, like, I'm naturally balding, but I'm pretty sure I pulled more hair out of my head. So I don't know. I guess you guys care about this team as much as I do, so I just called in to vent. But the last thing I'll say is, if Chris Middleton is a sixth man, it might be time to trade him, because he has a $34 million player option next year, and you can't have a $34 million player coming off the bench if you're, like, a serious contender. Like, the math just does not work. And I'm not saying anything that you guys don't see or John Horst doesn't see, but I don't know. If something doesn't change with Chris, I just don't see how they don't try and move him this year before the end of February. Which is sad, because I want that man to be here. I'm a Chris defender on Twitter. I want him to be here. I think he is a key piece to our success in the past and the future, but, like, I just don't see how the math works if he needs to come off the bench to be a successful team.
Thanks for the call, Q. There's a lot that needs to happen before we get to that point, and even the dollar figure for Chris Middleton, he could decline the option and sign an extension for less money annually, which you see a handful of times with players in his position. But just in terms of what is best for this team. So we've heard from Q that his vote is, and I suppose we should have asked too, but at least for the time being, go back to the starting lineup that you had before with Taurean Prince in place of Chris Middleton. That's your vote too, I would assume, Brandon?
Right now, yeah, it is. And it's not a knock on Chris, Justin. I love Chris. The Bucks are never trading him. I don't care what. If he goes, from the bench.
Never say never.
I suppose, but I just don't see Milwaukee trading him. I just don't see it. Maybe I'm wrong. I just don't. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, right now, and it's not that I don't think Chris has it. I don't think it's that he's lost too many steps. I just think this team rolled a little bit better with him coming off the bench, because I think, again, when you sub those guys in, you're not losing anything. You might be gaining something with Prince goes to the bench and Chris Middleton comes off, whatever minute mark in the first quarter, and you're still able to play your big three in crunch time. It's not like because he goes to the bench, you can't play the last 4 minutes of the game. So I think it just fits this team really well. They proved that, throughout the course of December, late November when he was making his way back. But I just don't think that they're going to end up trading him, despite that contract. I think that'll get reworked before we visit trade talks. But I've been wrong before, so I suppose I could be wrong again. But I don't see it right now.
Well, they can't rework it.
Well, they can't after the year, correct?
Well, it's not reworking the contract.
Well,
it's just he would decline the option or sign it. But
and
that
do it
wouldn't take place into the summer. And I think, the eye test would certainly tell you, I don't know if this is really working or it's certainly not optimized so far when they made that change. Out of necessity, too, is when Chris started in the starting lineup because that's when you were starting to play without a lot of guys. But I think the reason why you're certainly doing it now and sticking with it is you need more of a runway with Giannis and Damian Lillard and Chris Middleton on the floor together. Like, you need those guys consistently to work out the kinks. And for everything that Doc Rivers has noted, too, if we haven't fully installed the offense, and we're not going to do that yet until we get Chris for an extended period of time. So that's a big part of why you're doing it. So you can juice that and say, okay, we know we get him for X amount of minutes a game. It's still around 25. I think it was 25 or 26 tonight. It was, 30 against the Pacers where
he pushed it a little bit.
Where Chris himself pushed it and said, I'm playing.
26 tonight.
But I think the larger part of the conversation is, to Q's point, like, I think that's why a big piece of why you're doing it now and why it wasn't more of a gradual. Chris is going to work his way back off the bench and then gets in the starting lineup. It's a lot like the conversation that we have had before about why you give veterans the first crack at it every single time versus a young guy, because if the young guy struggles and you move on to the veteran, that can be tough for young guys' confidence, and sometimes you lose them altogether. Sometimes the vet doesn't work out either, and then it's, I guess we got to go back to this guy. I think it's kind of similar with this in that if you make the change now, and again, I do think it's at least up for debate given the way that Doc Rivers, he wasn't specifically asked, is Chris Middleton going to stay in the starting lineup? It was more about the offense as a whole. But Doc chose to go down that path. So I do think it's at least on the table. But if you do that and make that change, I think what you're signaling is he's just going to be our sixth man for the rest, and basically the Manu Ginobili role, where he's going to be the guy that's running the bench units. He did a lot of that last year. Maybe he gives us some scoring, a bulk of the scoring with Bobby Portis off the bench, but he's the guy that's going to run things. And maybe that gives you more room for Ryan Rollins, too, if Chris can be a guy out there with Ryan Rollins to bring him along. But I don't see you making that move and then going back at some point this season and saying, okay, just to kind of work out the kinks a little bit more and get back to where we were really clicking earlier this season. Taurean Prince is going back in the starting lineup. Chris is going to the bench. You do that, you're not making the change again. And so to Q's point, then the conversation becomes grander and is really one for the offseason, but it becomes a financial, if this guy is our sixth man, realistically, what can we take on? So that, to me, is why it is very complicated with that, but I'm not going to sit here and say it didn't look different when you had Taurean Prince, not necessarily just with the starters, but what Taurean Prince has kind of had to slot into since moving to the bench. It reduces your minutes with Giannis and with Damian Lillard and all the talk that Taurean Prince gave us at Media Day, too. I looked at all the numbers. I asked for the video clips, too, of catch-and-shoot threes last year because this is going to be what I'm doing. That's what Jay Crowder did, and if I'm on the floor with Giannis and Damian Lillard, they're going to be driving towards the basket a lot, and I'm going to get a lot of those looks. So that's how I feel like I can really perform at my best. And his shooting has fallen off since everybody started to return. And I think that's a big piece of it, is he doesn't have the quality of looks anymore.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask you that because it feels like when you watch him play, instead of, I don't know, maybe the first month plus, he seemed to just kind of find his spot, Justin, catch and shoot, and that was it. It feels like maybe he's pressing a little bit.
Well, and he was shooting what, 55,
58.3 tops in the league at the moment.
I mean, and look, Lakers fans would be the first to tell you this is who he is. Mm-hmm. But we saw similar things last year too with Jay Crowder when he started out red hot on threes, suffered the core injury, was never the same. There's been no injury for Taurean Prince. I didn't expect him to be a 58% three-point
Correct.
shooter.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't expect him to be a 45% three-point shooter. If he's consistently around 40%, great. You could make a case maybe they overextended him and played him a little too many minutes, or more than you anticipated earlier this season because of the Chris Middleton impact. But again, if you're getting him those looks and saying let's maximize his minutes with those guys because of what he's done in catch and shoot threes this season, it doesn't mean he plays more minutes than Chris Middleton. It means let's get him those looks early. Let's get him those looks early in the third quarter. Chris is still the guy that we can lean on to close the game.
And you're not losing anything defensively either, on the other side of the ball. So I'm curious to see where they go from here. I guess if there's a month where you want to kind of fiddle with things, I say that and they acting like they didn't just drop two games. But
I think they lost that opportunity now with the schedule that starts next week.
Slowly slipping. Yeah, you're right. But I'm curious to see and that's the one thing I like about Doc. If it's something's just not working, he's not afraid to just kind of pull the plug on it and go back to it. When did they insert Chris into the starting lineup? Was that when Giannis and Dame were out, correct?
I believe it was when Giannis and Dame were out.
And they were just trying to get more, more
they
minutes.
Just needed somebody to play. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Okay, because that's the other thing I'd be curious about is, when those two came back, was that the ramp up period that you were discussing, like get him some minutes, get him some time. Giannis and Dame are out. He started. Okay, now he's got a feel for it. We're going to get back into the big three out there together to start games. I'd be curious to see if the injury and the illness had any impact on why he's in the starting lineup versus coming off the bench. But I'll be curious to see where they go from here.
His first start was, I believe,
Chicago?
The Wizards game.
Okay.
That they played without Giannis and Damian Lillard.
Mm-hmm. At home, correct?
Yep.
That was here. Yep.
855-616-1620, the number to join us tonight on Bucks Talk. I mentioned some of the offensive numbers. We touched on it briefly, but Damian Lillard, taking a look at some of his numbers these past handful of games and the importance that he brings to this offense and where it needs to be. We'll dig into that conversation next.
This is Bucks Talk.
They looked back and said he stepped out of bounds, so not just a two. He doesn't get the three, and he's going to try to get it right back. He says, you know what, just give me the ball. Knocks down the three in the corner.
A.J. Green really the only bright spot in terms of the shooting for the Bucks tonight. 7 of 13 on his threes, but they lose once again to the Portland Trailblazers, 105-102. So now 1-4 in their last 5 games and 3-5 since they won the NBA Cup with that victory over the Oklahoma City Thunder. And it was the conversation that was happening, Dick in Port Washington and a few others, about look at what happened to some teams last year. Look at what the Lakers did. It was, 3-10? I think the Lakers went right after winning that. Mm-hmm. The Pacers were right around 500 coming out of the Cup. The availability and the injuries that this team has dealt with immediately after that are one thing that make it very difficult to say this is exactly what it is. But if that was your fear, the Bucks have done nothing to lead you off of that path in these 8 games that they've played since the NBA Cup. And individually, some of the guys that we talked about, Taurean Prince and what he's seemingly struggled with, trying to readjust to a different role now. The big one is Damian Lillard, Brandon, in that his last 5 games. So this stretch of play that we just discussed for the Bucks, he is shooting 34% from the floor and 33% on threes at 17 of 52. He's taken the most threes on the team in that stretch, and that includes guys that have played 8 or 9 games, and he's shooting 33%. Like, the defense has been much improved. The defense has consistently been one of the best in the league. I think they're, 8th best in the league since the 2-8 start. They've been very good in clutch situations, which you had again tonight. But this whole thing is centered around Giannis and Damian Lillard being elite offensive players consistently with an improved defense, and you haven't gotten it from Damian Lillard in this recent stretch.
And I'm not worried either. I'm not ringing the alarms on Damian Lillard. I think it's obviously a slump, to put it easy for him. I think he'll tell you that it's just a slump, and that I don't have any long-term fears about Damian Lillard and where he is going, for the rest of the year. My only concern, and I mentioned it earlier, was I just want him to be more assertive on offense. And I know you got Giannis, and I know Giannis demands the ball, and I shouldn't say demands, but wants the ball and is dominant with the ball in his hands. But I don't know, Justin. I feel like for an offense to kind of hit its peak, and we need this Bucks offense to be better, 102 points against Portland isn't going to get it done in the playoffs. I think that this is a better offensive team when Damian Lillard is being a little bit more of the Portland Dame and kind of taking the bulk of the shots early on, getting going offensively, and then incorporating guys like Giannis and the pick and roll with Brook, and you bring in Chris Middleton, and you have a plethora of shooters on this team that are going to be open, that are wide open. I mean, A.J. Green tonight, he had a few contested shots, but a chunk of those were, he was wide open. So I just want to see Dame kind of bust himself out of this slump and just go and assert himself early in games and not wait. At the end of the game, I know, Will was frustrated with the end of the play. I still don't know what that play was. I don't know who messed that up or what that was intended for. None of it made sense looking back at the replay. So, I don't know if Doc commented on the end of that, the last play that they had, or the second to last play that they had on offense, where Damian Lillard threw it to the corner where Bobby was supposed to be, or maybe he wasn't supposed to be. I don't know. But it's just working out those kinks, and I don't have fears, for where Damian's going. I think he'll snap out of it and get back on track.
He just quickly, Doc had said he thought on the first go round Dame was just going to take it to the basket.
Right. I think that's what everybody thought.
Yeah. It was interesting that you had two cracks at it, and Giannis was basically your decoy, that you set up both looks for Bobby Portis there. To your point about him taking earlier shots, Doc Rivers had some comments on that. We'll get into those and what he had to say and take a look ahead at Monday against the Toronto Raptors after this.
Welcome back to Bucks Talk.
So, to your point, Brandon, about wanting Dame to get more involved offensively early in games, Doc addressed that after the game tonight as well, and that was one of his big takeaways in what we've seen in some of those shooting splits we just referenced with Dame, 30%, low 30s on threes and field goal attempts in his last 5 games played. So basically coming out of that Hawks game in the semifinals and then the games that he's played since the NBA Cup. And Doc said we got to get him in a rhythm early. We got to get him better shots. I still want him to go downhill. I don't think he's done that as much since coming back, and that is a notable thing. We haven't seen quite as much of Dame getting into the paint and either scoring or passing from there. But it's something that's on top of mind for Doc Rivers as well. The last thing I have from this game as we start to wrap here was, we talked about the starting lineup and does that need to change. I wonder if we see a couple of tweaks before you do a wholesale change. We have continued to see Andre Jackson Jr. in the interesting spot where he starts, but he still plays about 10 minutes a game, and you don't see much of him in the second half. The offense is still one of the issues there. Have we reached the point where maybe we need to see A.J. Green just starting as the 2 because of what he's going to give you defensively as well, but his shot-making ability as well. And, again, the fact that it's the offense that is struggling. And, look, if you can't efficiently score with Brook Lopez, Giannis, Dame, A.J. Green, and Chris Middleton on the floor together, then it's a larger conversation.
I think the thing to take away from this whole conversation, Justin, to kind of put a bow on it as we get ready to wrap this up, is that the Bucks are going to be faced with a test from here on out until the playoffs begin and end. They have the answers to that test here in this building. They're here. They have the ability. I don't think they need to go out and get somebody or make this crazy move, or you could tweak the lineup. I think at the end of the day, as angry as I was to begin this show, I'm comfortable in saying that the answers to this test are on on this roster. They have the ability to figure it out. They have the talent, they have the depth, and they have the coaching. And I think that they will. But games like tonight leave you, me, Dick, very frustrated. And that just is what it is. You hope to bounce back on Monday.
Monday night, 6:30 tip in Toronto against the Raptors. 6 o'clock is when our pregame coverage begins. And as always, be sure to stick around after the game for Bucks Talk. We'll talk with you then.